Hi guys, this is Sarita. I will be in live within in 2 minutes. Yeah. Hi guys, it's already 9 p.m. Let me start the session. Hello everyone. Firstly, thank you for giving this opportunity. This is Sarita. Today I would like to explain about RE framework. First, we will see what is RE framework. RE framework is developed by the UiPath to help the developers to build a strong process. As you see here, RE framework is a project template based on a state mission. This RE framework comes up with the state mission. If you see here, RE framework is a template, means nothing but template is having some predefined tools. We are going to use this template and we can customize based on our requirements. As it is a customizable, you can change the existing template or you can add and remove anything from this template. And it is having workflow activities which is used to make our project strong. Mainly, this RE framework is used for transactional basis. Transaction may be an item from the queue or a file from a folder or a record in the Excel file. Okay, transaction is nothing but list of items. We have to loop each item from the list. If you see here, it is created to fit the best practices in the project, such as read and store the config data into dictionary, kill unnecessary processes, initialization of required application, exception handling, and it takes the screenshots of the exception. It retrieves the data from the orchestrator queue, or it may be from Excel sheet, or it may be from database, and it is also having the logging mechanism. This RE framework is also having modular approach. It is nothing but it is splitted into different modules like init all applications, get transaction data, kill processes, set transaction data, taking screenshot. All these workflow files having a special purpose. Why we need to go for RE framework? Because this RE framework providing so many functionalities. Let me show you what they are. If you see here, these are the functionalities this RE framework is providing. First one is logging. As this RE framework generates logs at every transaction level, which can help us to monitor the process, and it is used to handle the exception. Okay, coming to scalability, it is used to retry the failed transaction multiple times and it sends the exception notifications. Okay, if I talk about the config file, it is used to maintain our frequently changing values, like we can keep URLs of the application and file paths like PDFs, Excels, and here we can also place the sheet names of the Excel files. And if you are not working with the assets, then you can also place the username and passwords in this config file. Okay, coming to errors, coming to reusability, it works with any kind of process and it is independent of data source. It works with the queue items, or it works with the Excel files, and it works with the database or for emails. Okay, and it is having one more functionality, that is error screenshot. It takes the screenshots of the exception, where exactly we got the exception. Okay, let's move to the architecture of the RE framework. If you see here, this RE framework mainly created with the 4 states. In these three states are created with state activities, and one state is created with the final state activity, that is end process. Okay, let me explain how the flow goes and what actually each state, how it works, and what actually is in each state is happens. Okay, coming to first state, that is initialization. In this initialization, we are going to read the Excel file and we are adding the data to the dictionary, and here we are initializing the applications in this initialization. While reading the Excel file and while initial any system exception, then it directly goes to the get transaction data. If you get any exception while reading Excel and while opening the application, then it directly goes to the end process and it ends the bot. Okay, if we don't get any exception in this initialization state, then it goes to get transaction data. This get transaction data has 2 outcomes, that is data retrieval success and no data to retrieve. Okay, what actually this get transaction data do is, it is used to retrieve the data from the queue or from the Excel or from the files in the folder. If it founds the transaction item, if it founds the data, then it directly goes to the process transaction. If there is no data, then it directly goes to the end process, or else if you got any system exception also, it directly goes to the end process and it will end the bot. Okay, if you got the data in this get transaction item, then it will move to the next step, that is process transaction. If this process transaction has nothing, here we are going to add the activities which we are going to perform based on our requirement, and this process transaction has 3 outcomes, that is success, business exception and system exception. If the particular transaction is completed, means without getting any exception, means without getting any business rule exception or system exception, then it again goes to the get transaction data and retrieves the next transaction item and it processes for the next transaction item. If you got any exception like business rule exception, then what it will do, it will skip that particular transaction item and it will get the next transaction item to process. Okay, if you got system exception, while processing, then it directly goes to the initialization and it will try for that particular transaction item again from the initialization. Okay, if all the transactions are completed, if you don't have any data to process, then it directly comes to the end process and it will end the bot. Okay, let me go to UiPath. Okay, if you see here, this is the home page of UiPath. Let me create a process using RE framework. Here you can give the name of your project. I'm giving a RE framework demo. In this location we are going to save our project. If you want, you can also change the location. In this description, if you want to add any description related to your project, you can add. Okay, let me create. While creating, all the dependencies and the workflow files will be saved into a folder. Okay, let me go to File Explorer from this project. If you see here, we will be having a data folder. In this we have config file. Okay, this config file is having 3 sheets. First one is settings, second one is constants, and third one is assets. These settings and constant sheets are defined with the column names. Those are names with their value and with the description. Coming to settings page, by default they provided the queue name. Here, if your project data is in the orchestrator queue, then you can provide the queue name here, which you have given in the orchestrator. Okay, and here by default they provided the log of business process name, and the value here is framework. If you want, you can change the process name. If I want, I can change the process name, that is RE framework demo. Project name is. Okay, if you want to add any URLs of the applications and sheet names, you can give all these in this settings page. Coming to constants, if I talk about constant sheet, so here we can provide the maximum retry number. So in this case, if exception, so in case of exception, if you wish your workflow to be executed again, you can provide the maximum retry number. If I provide here 2, then if I get any system exception, it will retry for the 2 times. Okay, and also here they provided the screenshot path. In this folder path, all the exception screenshots will be saved here, and all these are used for the log messages. If you want, we can also define delays and timeouts here. Coming to assets page, this sheet is used to get the value from the orchestrator. What you have to do is, you just have to, you can give name of any name here. Asset 1. Here we have to give the asset name which you have created in the orchestrator in asset column. Okay. Okay. Let's move to RE framework template. Okay. If you see here, this general business process, here the type given is state mission. As I already said, this RE framework template is built with the state mission, and it is having 4 states, that is initialization, get transaction data, end process, and process transaction. First I will explain about initialization, what actually is happening in this initialization. Let me open this workflow file. If you see here, this entire initialization is surrounded with the try catch block to make to handle the exception. Okay, if you first see here, this nothing is assigned to the system exception. If I open the variables, okay, this system exception type, this is system exception variable type is system exception. At first there is no system exception, so we are assigning nothing to system exception. If we got any error, any system exception at process transaction, then it comes to the initialization and it makes that system exception to nothing and do the next steps. Okay, coming to next step, here they given the condition config is nothing. Here this config is a dictionary variable of type dictionary. If you see here, they wrote if first run, at first time only this will execute, means at first time there will be no data to the dictionary, right? So this directly go to the true part. If you run at the second time, then there will be the data to the dictionary. Okay, first time this config is nothing, right? So it goes to the true part, that is first run sequence. Here if you see here, they have invoked the init settings workflow file provided with the arguments in config file, in config sheets and out config. If you see here, they given the path of the config file here, names in this argument, and here the dictionary variable, that is config. Let me open this workflow file. Okay, here first they have created a dictionary to add the values to the dictionary. If you see here, in this for each they are looping. If you are working with only this settings sheet, then you don't need to use this for each. Directly read that sheet and loop all the rows in the sheet. Okay, if you see here, they are looping each sheet and they are reading that particular sheet and storing in a settings and constant data table. Here what they are doing is they are looping each row from that settings and constant data table and they are adding the value to the dictionary. When they are adding the value, when not string dot is null or white space of row of name dot to string dot trim, means when the value in this column name space, then only we are going to add that value to the dictionary. Okay, if we have null value in this name and we have value in this column, in this value name column, we are not adding to the dictionary. Okay, after this we will be having, here they are reading the asset sheet and here they are looping the each row from the asset sheet, and here they are getting the asset value from the orchestrator and assigning that asset value to the dictionary. If you see here, we have exception. If we got any exception here, this try catch block is used to catch the exception. If you see here, if we got any exception while loading the asset value, then we are writing it in a log message. This is all about init settings. Coming back here, if you see here, this is okay. What it will do is, if you see here, we will be having an argument that is in underscore orchestrator qname. If you give a qname which is in the orchestrator, then it will override that qname with the qname which is in the config file. Okay, if you give the qname, for example, if you give, you have created Q1 which is in your orchestrator, but here we have given process ABCQ, then then which one it will take? This will take this q1. Why? Because it is overwriting the qname which is in the config file. When we are adding this qname to the dictionary, when the value in this argument is not nothing or not white space, then only we are adding this to the dictionary. Okay, coming to next step. Here we are killing the processes before starting the process. Let me open this. Okay, if you want to kill all the processes before starting the process, what you have to do is take an activity, that is get processes, create a variable in this output, it is process, take for each, and take the kill process and pass the item in this process name, item dot toString. What it will do? It will do all the it will kill all the processes that are running in the background. If you want to kill only Chrome, or if you want to kill only Word, then you don't need to use this activity. Just take an assign and pass Chrome and WinWord. Change the variable to array of string, because we are only killing Chrome and Word. Okay, remove this one. Okay, this one will kill only Chrome and WinWord applications. Okay, coming back to main. Here it is writing the process name in the log field. We have given here this name will be right in the log message. Next coming to here they invoked the initall applications workflow file. If you see here, it is provided with the one argument, that is config. Let me open this workflow file. Here there will be nothing. If you want to open any applications, here you can open all those applications, and by giving the username and password to log in into that application. Okay. Okay, this entire block is kept in the try catch, right? If you got any system exception, we are assigning that particular exception to the system exception variable. If there will be no exception while reading the Excel file and initializing the application, then it is successful, right? Then it goes to the next step, that is get transaction data. If you got any system exception while reading the Excel file and initializing the application, then it directly goes to the end process and it will end the bot. Here we can see, here they assigned transaction item is nothing. If there is no system exception, then it goes to get transaction data. If you see here, system exception is not nothing, means there is an exception, so it directly goes to the end process and it will end the bot. Okay. If you won't get any exception in this initialization part, then it directly goes to the get transaction data. As I already said, this get transaction data is used to retrieve the data from the queues or from the Excel or from the mails in the inbox. Okay. Okay, if you see here, they have added a should stop activity. Okay, if someone is stop the job from the orchestrator, then it directly goes to the true part. It will write a log message, that is stop process is requested, and here nothing is assigned to the transaction item. By default in RE framework, the transaction item is queue type. Okay, why we are assigning nothing to transaction item? Because if the transaction item is nothing, then it directly goes to the end process and it will stop the bot. Okay, if no one is click the stop button from the orchestrator, then it will go to the else part. If you see here, this get transaction data workflow file is placed in try catch block. Let me show the arguments that they have used. Here they used 7 arguments, that is transaction number, config, transaction items, field 1, field 2, transaction ID and transaction data. Mainly we are working with the transaction number, config, transaction item and transaction data. If you want to work with the transaction field 1, field 2 and transaction ID, we can, or else we can remove this from this template. Let me open this workflow file. Okay, this one is used, this activity is used to get the transaction item from the queue. If you are not working the queue, just delete this and place and write the logic on what data source you are working. If you are working with the Excel, you have to add the logic here. Okay, coming here. Okay, our transaction item is not nothing, means if there is a transaction item, they are just adding data to the log fields. That is now.toString to out transaction ID, string.empty to out transaction field 1 and string.empty to out transaction field 2. Okay. Okay, this transaction sorry. If you see here, okay, if you see here, the transaction this transaction number is a variable type of int. It is a int type variable. This transaction number will be, if this transaction number will be incremented, then it gets the next transaction item. While retrying, if you got the exception at the process, it will retry the same transaction item, right? So at that time the transaction number will be same. If it goes to the next transaction item only, this transaction number will be first the transaction number will be incremented and then it goes to the next transaction item. This is all about get transaction data. Okay. If you got any system exception while retrieving the data, then we are directly going to the end process. If you see here, if transaction is nothing, means if there is no data in the transaction item, then it directly goes to the end process. If we found new transaction item, means if there is a data in the transaction item, then it goes to the process transaction. Okay. As I already said, process transaction having nothing, we have to add the data, we have to add the activities in the process transaction based on our requirement. And this process transaction is having 3 outcomes, that is system exception, business exception and success. Let me open this workflow file. Okay, if you see here, this one is also placed in a try catch block. Okay, at first nothing is assigned to the business exception. Let me open the variables. Okay, this business exception is variable of type business rule exception. At first there is no business rule exception, so here we are assigning nothing to the business exception. And here they invoked the process workflow file with the arguments transaction item and in config. If I open this, there will be nothing in this process. You have to add the activities based on our requirement to process the transaction items. Okay, if you got any exception while processing the transaction item, it may be a business rule exception or it may be a system exception. Okay, if we got the system exception, then it will catch, then the catch block will catch the exception and it will assign that particular exception to the system exception variable. If you got any business rule exception, then business rule exception will be assigned to the business exception variable. Okay, coming to finally, this try block and finally block will execute always. This catch block executes when there is an exception. Okay, coming to finally block, if you see here, it is also having a try block. It invoked with the set transaction status. Let me open this. If you see here, if here they write the condition business rule exception is nothing and in underscore system exception is nothing, means there is no system exception and there is no business exception. Then what it will do? Then it comes to the true part. Then it comes to the success sequence. Let me open this. Here, if you are working with the queues, it will check the condition if transaction item is not nothing and the transaction item variable type is queue item, then it goes to the true part and it will add the log that is successful. Okay, and here also we are adding the custom logs and we are logging a message that is that particular transaction item is successful, and we are removing the log fields if there are any duplicates. This is about the success sequence. Next it will comes to the increment transaction index, means when it will comes here, if there is no system exception, then what it will do, it will increment the transaction number, and here we are assigning 0 to retry number, means if the transaction is successful, then we don't need to retry, right? So here we are assigning 0 to the retry number and we are incrementing the transaction number. By this it directly goes to the init settings and it goes to the get transaction data and it will retrieve the next transaction item. Coming over here, if any exception is there, if it is having system business exception or system exception, then it comes to the false part. Here it is checking in underscore business exception is not nothing, means if you have business exception then it comes to the true part. If you don't have system exception, means it is having, if you don't have business exception is it is having the system exception, then it goes to the false part. If we have business exception, it will come here. Let me open this. Here again it is checking if transaction item is not nothing and the transaction item variable type of is queue, then it is adding the field that it is failed. It adds the log field that it is failed. And coming here it is just adding the custom logs that we got the business exception, and here logging a message with log level type is error, and in this message here we are writing the exception that we got while doing the process, and here we are removing the log fields. When we got the business exception, we are skipping that particular transaction item and we are incrementing the transaction number here and making the retry number to 0, and again we are going to get the next transaction item from the get transaction data. If you see here, It will goes here when we have system exception. Here also we have given a condition, in transaction item is not nothing, and the in transaction item variable type is queue item. If this one is true, then it comes to here. Here we are setting the status as failed, that particular transaction is failed, and here we are giving the retry number. If we are working with the queue item only, if you are working with the queues, then here we are assigning in transaction item dot retry number. This retry number we have to give in the orchestrator. While creating a queue, you have to provide the retry number there. Okay, here we are adding the log fields, and here we have invoked the retry current transaction provided with the arguments. Those are in config, retry number, IO transaction number, business system exception, and queue retry. Let me open this workflow file. If you see here, if the value in the config, if the value in the maximum retry number is greater than 0, means if the value given here is greater than 0, then it writes the log message. Okay, if it is greater than 0, then it comes to this true part. If it is not greater than 0, then it write a log message, that is here we are not retrying, and here we are incrementing the, if we are not retrying, then we are just incrementing the transaction number, and we are going to retrieve the next transaction item. Okay, if the value given in the config is greater than 0, then it comes to the true part. Here it will check IO retry number is greater than or equals to maximum retry number. If the retry number is greater than the value in the config file, then it means that maximum retries are reached. If the given retry number is given, if the given retry number is maximum, it means that maximum retries are reached. Then it goes to the true part, and it write a log message that maximum retry numbers are reached. And here we are assigning 0 to retry number, and we are incrementing the transaction number, and we are retrieving the next transaction item. If this condition is failed, here we are writing a log message. Here we are writing a log message, and here we are checking if you are using the, or if you are working with the orchestrator queues, then it will retry up to that maximum retries, and it will increment the next transaction item, and it will goes to the and it will get the next transaction item from the get transaction data. If you are not working with the orchestrator queue, if you are working with Excel, what it will do, it will increment the retry number up to maximum retries. Still, if you got up to maximum retries also, still if you got the system exception, then it will increment the transaction number, and it will retrieve the next transaction item. Okay. In this exception block, we are just logging a message, exception type. Sorry. If you see here, after this retrying current transaction invoke file, here we are just removing the duplicate log fields if there are any, if duplicate log fields are there. Then coming over here this we have invoked take screenshot invoke file. What it will do is, it will take the screenshot of the exception and will save all those screenshots in a folder. If you got any exception here also while taking the screenshot, this catch block will catch that particular exception, and here we are logging a message that failed to take the screenshots. And again, at the end of the processes, we are going to close all the applications in this workflow file. If you got any exception while closing the applications, this catch block will catch the exception, and here we are killing all the processes. And here we are writing, if you got any exception while killing the processes also, this catch block will catch that exception, and here we are going to write a log message. This is all about RE framework. Let me show an example. Yeah. Okay. If you see here, in this input file, I have taken an input file. What I am doing is, I am just calculating the distance between Kurnool to Hyderabad and Hyderabad to Srinagar distance, and I am writing the distance value in this column. This is my requirement. Okay, let me go to initialization part where I changed. I didn't change anything here. In this init application, I'm just opening an application. I just gave the key value in this dictionary. Let me show the config file. Here I gave the URL. I'm calling this value by using this URL key, and here I have already given the file path of the Excel. Okay, and here I am reading that particular input Excel, and next I am going to get transaction data. Here as I am not working with the queues, right? So here I am added a logic that if IO transaction number, if you are working with the Excels, the first transaction number starts with the 0, right? So if 0 is less than or equals to rows.count, means Excel rows.count, then it goes to true part. Sorry, my system has hanged. My God. Okay. If the transaction number is less than or equal to the rows.count, then we are assigning the data to the transaction item. If this one is false, we are assigning nothing to the transaction item, and we are assigning 0 to transaction number. Means it directly goes to the end process. If we have data, if that condition, if we retrieve the data from the get transaction data, then it goes to the process transaction. Here I am attaching that particular Chrome, and I am typing here to calculate the distance by using the find children activity. I am getting that particular value, and then I am closing, and then I am navigating back to the web page. If we don't get any exception while processing the transaction item, then I'm writing the output in the second column. Here in this variable I am getting the distance. I'm writing this value in the cells in B column. Okay. In end process, I'm just closing the application. I have used the Chrome application here. I'm just closing the Chrome button. First I will run this bot, how it works. I think it's taking some time. Did I start it? If you see here, it is going to the Chrome website. Here in this field we are going to type to calculate the distance. I just took only 2 rows in the Excel. First transaction item is completed. And it is navigating back to the page, and again it will searching for the second transaction item, and it is getting the value from there. Okay, if you see the output, let me show you the output. Yes, sorry. If you see here, I write the output here in this B column. Yeah, this is all about RE framework. Thank you guys.